Hey, this is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire. And if you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend, Denis Gianoutsos. He's prepared to ignite.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos.
Hey, welcome to the show, Leadership is Changing. What we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Leaders everywhere confront similar obstacles because people are people, but everywhere you go, leaders are overwhelmed, disrupted, and under pressure. They run from email to email, meeting to meeting. Many leaders are not changing quick enough, which means they run the risk of becoming irrelevant and being left behind. The purpose of the show is taking our listeners' leadership to another level by finding their balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. I believe we don't have enough effective leaders in the world today, and if we can get the leaders to step up and lead change, then they can inspire real change. It is now time to adapt in our fast-moving world. Hey listeners, welcome to the Ask Denis episode, which is a freestyle episode that I do once a week, and where I'm asked questions by our listeners, or I can share thoughts, insights, and experiences from working with many leaders across the globe. And so twice a week, I release a episode which is interviews with some leader around the world. And then the third thing that I release once a week is this Ask Denis episode. Listeners, what I would also like to say to you is just check out the new Facebook group, Leadership is Changing, that has been launched. And if you go to Facebook and search for Leadership is Changing group, you'll see that and you'll find that available for you to join, and love to see you there, because that's where we're sharing insights, experiences, thoughts, stories, getting people to build a community, a tribe, and it'd be great to see you there in that group, Leadership is Changing. Hey, today I want to talk to you about a question that's sort of asked quite a bit, and it comes down to, based on what we're doing a lot lately, whereby we've had this pandemic hit us, and across the globe in different countries, and every country is different in the way they're handling it, but the way that they're going in different types of lockdowns, as they're calling it. And in the lockdowns, what we're noticing is that various leaders, whether they be in a large corporate or leaders being in their own business, entrepreneurs, or even their own career, what they're talking about is that everyone's talking about this word that's come up. Now, there's been various words that have been used every single time as people talking about the pandemic. There's one word, the coronavirus, and so forth. Another one was unprecedented times. In other words, we haven't seen this before. But one word that keeps coming up a lot, and that is the word pivot. So pivot, P-I-V-O-T. And everyone's talking about pivoting. So what does it mean, and what's involved in it? And so I thought I'd just share with you today my thoughts around pivoting and sort of give you a bit of an analogy to help you understand what it means for you. But what I'd love to do is to hear what you think about it as well, whether it be in that Facebook group or even in a review that you leave down below of this podcast, or even if you want to send me an email, feel free to do that, and check that out in the show notes. So everyone is talking about pivoting. So what is this pivoting? So I went out and I wanted to look at the meaning of pivot. And the noun side of it is it's the central point, the pin, or the shaft on which a mechanism turns or oscillates. Okay? And then on the verb side was it's a turn on, as if on a pivot. So he swung round, pivoting on his heel. And so they're the sort of meanings that I've looked up online just to see what it means by pivot. But a lot of people, they talk about this in business as leaders, about pivoting and so forth. And I want to give you an analogy today and talk to you about dancing. And so I don't know if many of you know, the listeners, that when I met Mary, my partner, 20 years ago, she was a really good at dancing and ballroom and Latin dancing. And she said to me, well, if you want to go with me, you're going to have to learn to dance. And I went, oh, I know how to dance. And then so we went to a ball, and apparently I didn't know how to dance very well. So I got to get into one-on-one lessons with a teacher, and the teacher taught me a lot. And gosh, it's a wonderful sport to be part of. If you are wanting to do that, I highly recommend you do that. And in one of the episodes, or one of the things I talk about is that to go out and present to executives or to others, one thing you could look at doing is going out and learning to dance, because I think it's a great way of teaching you how to hold yourself, project yourself, work the room, but also how to pivot. And in dance, what that means is that's when we want to turn to a new direction. Now, why do we want to do that? Well, because as we're dancing through the dance floor, and it's a bit probably like when you're walking through the streets and it's really busy, or you want to go in a different direction, what you'll need to do is pivot and move in that direction as well. But before we can do that, and before we can move and actually pivot, what we need to do is we need to compress into our ankles and knees while we turn and we rise out on our toes in the dance sense, and then we come out in the new direction. And so if we start thinking about business, if we start thinking about leadership, and if we think about where we are with the COVID side of things now and where we want to go, what can we do to pivot? Now, why do you need to pivot? Well, for a lot of business owners and leaders in organizations, what they're finding is that for them to survive in the marketplace today, they're going to have to pivot. Now, there's a whole range of things that are involved in this. Now, why are people having to pivot? Well, the thing here is that for a lot of places, their businesses can no longer be done a certain way due to lockdown, due to the pandemic. So as an example, if you're in the hospitality industry and you have a restaurant or a cafe, for a lot of them in the lockdown period, they weren't allowed to be open. And that could be for 4 weeks, 5 weeks, or a period of time whereby there is loss of income. Then there are others who have got businesses that they're not able to sort of use or sell their product because it's not relevant anymore, or they could go and do something a little bit differently. And so what they would do is they would pivot. In the speaking industry, I saw that, whereby a lot of speakers weren't able to go out and do face-to-face speaking engagements up on stages around the world, travel the globe, and do what they need to do. Now, because of the airlines and there's not many flights happening and people aren't able to travel from country to country, a lot of those speakers have had to pivot their businesses into other things that they can do. For some people, they've gone and pivoted, and they've gone now and started making masks, or they're going into hand sanitizers and creating that type of thing. So what they've done is they've taken their daily stream of business and they've gone and pivoted to go and do something else that could be either very similar or something totally different, and they're going in a new direction. Now, for a lot of leaders, for a lot of business owners, they haven't pivoted. And by not pivoting, they've run the risk of becoming irrelevant. And for a lot of them, some of them have already started to close down. Some of them are struggling because the income's not there anymore, the revenue, the turnover, that's not just there. The customers aren't buying. For some of them, they've had to take their business from what it was in a bricks and mortar situation to an online business. And so they've had to pivot that way. And by them doing that, that's been really interesting. But the whole process of what's involved in doing it, just like the analogy I talked about before, that before you can go in that new direction, you have to compress into your ankles and your knees while turn and then rise out of it. So it's a bit like going back, hunkering down, starting to think about strategizing, thinking about what you need to do to pivot. What's the new business direction? What's the new leadership style that you need to do? What are some things that you might need to do as a corporate to work together with your organization to move forward? So you might need to compress a little bit, slow down, stop, move down a little bit, think about things, pull things together, and then you can turn. But as you turn and you rise, that's when you're starting to then launch your new business, your new idea, your new leadership style, something that you've pivoted to go off into a new direction to do. And so in business, in leadership roles, as your style or your organization, we're going to have to think about pivoting throughout our careers. And for some of you, you may have pivoted your career. In other words, you've gone and done something and you're doing a certain role, but then you're totally gone off to go and do a total different career. And so you've gone and done some study, or you've gone and chosen a brand new career, and you've gone off that on to go and do that, and that's how you've pivoted to go and do that. Now, the compressing of the ankles and the knees, and that could be the further study that you've gone and done to help you get into the new role. It could be the strategizing, it could be the relationships that you've built. There could be all sorts of different business ideas, all sorts of things that you're doing that you're actually brainstorming either on a whiteboard, paper, into a sketchbook to start thinking about things. So then you can rise and onto your toes, and then once you're on your toes, you can start running. So team, pivoting is really, really important. And so that's why we're hearing about it a lot. Because you see, it's not just now that's having the pandemic, it's also about what we've seen in the fourth industrial revolution around digital and other things that we've worked on. So let's talk about digital as an example. So Kodak, a great example whereby, did they actually have a digital camera? Well, I think they did. But did the board run with it? No, they didn't. And if they didn't run with it, what happened? They got left behind. They became irrelevant. Where other markets, other organizations went ahead and did that. And so if you as a business owner, for you as a leader within the business, if you're not developing, pivoting, growing, moving forward to to rise and then get on your toes and then get going, you're going to become irrelevant and be left behind. And so what you need to do today, if that's whereby you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit not sure about where things are going, first, based on the pandemic, based on lockdowns, based on financial or the economies going forward, based on this pandemic and so forth, or if your business is changing and customers are wanting something totally different, are you going to be stubborn and not move with the times? Or are you going to step back and think about how or what do I need to do to pivot my business, my leadership style, my career to help me move forward? I'm going to encourage you to step back and think about that. In fact, I'm going to encourage you that if you need help, if you need to sit down and talk to somebody about that, feel free to reach out to me. Because you see, I think the times that I've seen organizations, the times that I've seen individuals, and at times I've seen entrepreneurs and their businesses when they've pivoted and have gone off to go and do other things, was it easy? No. But was it worthwhile? And the answer is yes, because they've gone off to go and do some other things. They've gone off to go do some bigger things, but they've gone off to go and pivot onto other areas whereby they may not have thought about it before. Now, for some of us, we're forced to do that because of certain circumstances. For some people, they get made redundant because of downsizing, a merger, or takeover. And so they've left an organization. So now they've been forced to start thinking about it, forced to pivot if they want to, and then get on with things that they need to get on with. So team, pivoting. That's what it's about. It's about us going and doing what we need to do, turning into a new direction. And think about that. What do you need to do in the next 5 years? Where will you be in the next 5 years, and how do you need to pivot? And so when you hear my guests and I on the podcast talking about pivoting, that's what we mean. We mean by going into a new direction. And then you may need to turn on your heel to go in that new direction. So today you may be heading south, but what do you need to do to turn to go north, east, or west? Up to you. Think about it. If you need help, feel free to reach out to me. But team, pivoting is going to be really, really essential, important, and vital for a lot of organizations and a lot of leaders going forward in what they're actually doing. So team, hey, once again, check out the Leadership is Changing Facebook group that's available now. Feel free to join the community here, the tribe. I'd love to see you in that area. Once again, if you're wanting to spend some time just to sort of have a little bit of a chat and explore some things for yourself, feel free to reach out to me. Then my email will be in the actual show notes, but feel free to do that. And also my website, www.leadingchangepartners.com. But team, awesome to have you with me again today on the Ask Dennis episode. and when we talked about what does it mean when everyone's talking about pivoting, what does it mean and what does it involve? Hey, thanks for joining today. What we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Change is incredibly scary, especially with the unknown and the unfamiliar territory. It is time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing. Look out for the episodes as they're being released. Download them, have a listen, share them with your network, put a rating and some reviews as well. And if there's a question you want to ask me or any feedback you'd like to give me or a question that you want me to ask my guests, feel free to send me an email, dennis@leadingchangepartners.com. That'll be in the show notes. And other than that, team, always a pleasure being with you. Hey, thanks for tuning in today. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.